and welcome to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. My name is Jesse, and I'll be your host. So on today's episode, I'm hitting you with a bonus episode because I feel like it. So when you're listening to this, it's August of 2022, and I have released an episode about Muriel's wedding. So that will be up and ready for you to listen to. But I also decided to throw in another Australian film that I mentioned in that episode about Muriel's wedding. I want to cover this wonderful movie. It is the penultimate drag queen road trip movie. We're going to talk about The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert from 1994. This film is just so fun. So I'm giving you a double whammy of Australian films now. So feel free to listen to both of the episodes. You know, I really enjoy Priscilla. I think it's a great piece of queer cinema. It's so great. My history with this movie. This is a recent watch for me. Currently right now in August of 2022, this movie is streaming on Tubi for free, which is great. It may or may not be still streaming if you are listening to this in the future. But even if you are, go up and pull up and go watch it. It's great. But you know, this movie is just, I probably saw it for the first time. I actually watched this and Tu Wong Fu over a year ago now, maybe in June or July of 2021, because they were all on Tubi, so I was like, alright, cool. I'm still thinking of whether I want to do a Tu Wong Fu episode. We'll see as time goes on. But this movie's just so great. I love it. So the basic idea of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So this film is about these three queens. You got these two drag queens and a trans woman, pretty much, who are traveling across Australia to go to a gig that they've got, and a whole bunch of craziness ensues from there, pretty much. So this movie was a huge deal. I think when it came out, it was made, I'll get to the figures, but, it was a relatively low budget, but it made a fair amount of money back. It is a movie, like I think I talked about in the Muriel's wedding episode, that film did well when it came to America, in 1995 it was released, but in the Australia, it was in 94 it was released. But, this movie, when it came to America, it also did really well, and it was able to, it is really a part of that. I think I called it the kind of holy trinity of Australian films, because not only do all of them have Bill Hunter in them, but they also, this movie, Muriel's Wedding, and Strictly Ballroom all kind of came over and were able to kind of get out of Australia and really have international appeal and success, which is awesome. So I'm very glad I watched this movie. Again, it was a recent watch for me. It is a great piece of queer cinema, I think. I will say, so I guess I'll just preface this by saying, spoiler alert, spoilers are abound. This is a movie review podcast, so you should probably expect that. I will also state, too, that this movie was made in 1993. It was released in 94. So some of the stuff in this movie does not work. It may not be exactly politically correct, if you will, in today's standards. But, I think it's important to, of course, look at a piece of cinema for when it was released. And even with its kind of shaky parts, I still really enjoy this film. And I believe it is absolutely a cult classic in the queer space, and even just outside of it too. This thing won an Oscar for the costumes. It had some mass appeal, and it made a fair amount of money. So, you gotta give credit where credit's due, So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over some figures about the movie. I'll go over some critical response quotes. We'll talk about some of the characters in the movie, and then I'm gonna give you some information about, just some context about, gay life in Australia when this movie was coming out, and even before that, and then just some fun facts that I found, and then we'll move into a plot summary. But let's get on to those figures. The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was released May 15th, 1994. It was screened at the Cannes Film Festival, where it got a standing ovation, which was really great. It was then released in the United States August 10th, 1994, and then released in Australia September 8th, 1994. We're looking at a budget of around $2 million or so. I think that was converted to American dollars from what I saw. And then I'm looking at a box office. I've seen everything from 11 million to like over 25 million. I think almost 29 million. So needless to say, this money, this made its money back and then some. We're looking at a Rotten Tomatoes score of 94% on the tomato meter, and then 88% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. We're looking at a IMDb score of 7.5 out of 10 and a Letterboxd score of 3.8 out of 5. Critical response pull quotes that I was able to find for this movie. So we have good old Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times. He states that it's too bad that the requirements of plotting require movies like this to crank up the event count, when actually what works is just the daily minutia of Bernadette's life. We then have Rita Kempsley from the Washington Post, who states, writer-director Stephan Elliott is obviously fond of his characters, and this may account for the upbeat storyline, but it blinds him to how very annoying 2 hours of dishing can be. And then we have Lawrence Friskella from The Advocate, and this is actually a recent quote. It was April 4th, 2022. He states that while this concept has definite fun appeal, the movie lacks follow-through. For our cast of characters, we have Terence Stamp as Bernadette Basinger, who in this universe of the film is a trans woman. We have Hugo Weaving as Anthony Belrose, also known as Tick, and they are known as Mitzi Del Bras. We then have Guy Pearce as Adam Whiteley, also known as Felicia Jolly Goodfellow. We have Bill Hunter as Robert Bob Spart. We have Sarah Chadwick playing Marion Barber. We have Mark Holmes playing Benjamin Barber. And then we have Julia Cortez playing Cynthia Campos. So just wanted to go over some casting information about this film as well. So for the three leads, so the primary choice for the role of Bernadette was actually Tony Curtis, who read and approved of the script, but then just became unavailable, so he couldn't do it. They then approached John Cleese, who also was not interested. And then they ended up finding Terence Stamp. This is actually a part where, he didn't really know how to feel about it, playing this role. But I think he does a wonderful job, honestly. And he saw it as like, as this character, I need to believe that I am the most beautiful woman ever, for it to come across authentically. And I absolutely thought it did. For the role of Tick, also known as Mitzi, that ended up being Hugo Weaving, they initially wanted either Rupert Everett, and for Adam, they wanted Jason Donovan, who's an Australian actor dude, who had, I think, also been on the Guy Pearce. He had been on the same soap opera Guy Pearce had been on at the time. And so they did want them initially. However, apparently at a pre-production casting meeting, they didn't get on very well. They were like openly hostile towards each other. So that didn't really help. But, Jason Donovan would end up actually going on to play Mitzi Tick in the West End musical adaptation of this film. But Hugo Weaving actually had just worked on the movie Frauds, which was Stephan Elliott's first film, and he trusted him, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. I'll do it with you. It's totally cool. And then, they also tried to get Colin Firth for Mitzi's role, but then they gave it to Hugo Weaving, and I think he does great in it, too. He really makes you feel for this character. Apparently, Tim Curry was also considered for the part of Bernadette, but that didn't end up working out. But there was a stipulation of, and I think with Guy Pearce especially, he had previously been on the Australian soap opera Neighbours in the late 80s. And I think he really wanted to kind of crash through that image that he had gotten on the soap opera, and I think this was kind of a really good way to kind of break out of that, which I thought was really great. But the role of Bob actually came from Terence Stamp. He said, I'd play this role, I'll do it, but only on one stipulation. I want Bill Hunter to play my boyfriend. And he did wonderfully. You know, he just, and Bill Hunter, Terence Stamp even said, like, he accepted the role without even reading the script or knowing anything about except the basic character description. And plus, also, at the same time he was doing this, he was doing Muriel's Wedding, which probably was not shooting around the same place. So, he was pulling double duty with that, but I thought Bill Hunter did absolutely fabulous in this film. Also, another little fun fact. So Julia Cortez in this film, what's her name? It is Julia Cortez. She has only been in 2 films. This is her debut. But also for any 90s children out there, she was actually the movie version of Rita Repulsa from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. So I thought that was really fun. And those are the only 2 roles she's had. I think that's a pretty good career if you say so myself. Just do both of those. It works. It's great. So now that we've gone over a little bit of casting, we're going to go into a little bit about the filming of this movie. On some filming information about this film. So in the opening scene and the closing scene, this was actually shot at the Imperial Hotel in Erskinesville, which is in Sydney, New South Wales. The Imperial Hotel has hosted drag shows since 1983. It's continued to be an icon of Sydney LGBT life. Apparently has a restaurant renamed Priscilla's in honor of the film. A lot of these scenes that are shot, including one where Bernadette encounters a butch, bigoted woman named Shirley. This was actually shot out in the outback town of Broken Hill in New South Wales, mainly at a hotel named Mario's Palace, which is now simply called the Palace Hotel. We also have some small scenes were shot in the All Nationals Hotel. They also decided to film at Coober Pedy, which I don't know if I said that right, but it's a rough and tumble mining town. This is where you see Ping Pong Show, I believe. We'll learn more when I get to the plot summary. You see that there, and then also some scenes where Guy Pearce as Felicia decides to go out on the town and kind of runs into some trouble. That was done there as well, and a lot of these extras actually were literally just miners who lived there. They weren't actors or anything. Also, so near the end of the film, you see that there is these queens that go, and it's an iconic kind of image of these queens kind of mountain hiking, I guess. So originally they tried to get permission to film upon the geological formation known as Ayers Rock, or The Rock, also known as Uluru. But this was rejected by organizations responsible for the monument. So that's it's a historically significant and culturally significant area. The Uluru Board of Management said no, it would be in violation of Indigenous Australian religious beliefs, because that's another part of this movie too, is that you do have a scene with some Aboriginal people from Australia as well. So instead, this scene was actually shot at Kings Canyon, and so dialogue for that scene was actually had to be rewritten to help accommodate for that new location. I just wanted to go over some kind of context for this film, of just some basic history of what was going on in Australia with gay rights before this film came to be, just so it can give you some context. I got this information from a really good documentary. It's almost about an hour long. I found it on YouTube. It's called Between a Frog and a Hard Place, and it interviews different folks who are involved in this production. So you're talking to Stephan Elliott, who is the writer and director of this film. We're talking to the 3 leads, Terence Stamp, Hugo Weaving, and Guy Pearce, respectively, and then other people who also were a part of this inspiration for the film. So when we talk about gay rights and homosexuality in general in Australia, back in the 70s, this was widely looked down upon in this, continent. According to one of the interviewees of this doc, sex between men between men, carried a 14-year prison sentence and a whipping, and apparently that was even worse than sexual assault. So the basic idea is being gay was pretty much against the law back then, and also extremely very toxic masculinity type thing going on too. Very macho kind of tenor, if you will. Being something different than that was not exactly looked upon as good. Stephan Elliott himself came from a family of divorce. His parents divorced when he was a kid, and he actually ended up he is queer as well. He came out as gay in 2012. One of the important key people of this inspiration of the film was a drag queen named Cindy Pastel, who inspired the character of Mitzi in this film. I think they're still around in Australia. Their story is interesting because, they were a performer in Sydney and they were really into it. Sydney was kind of a hub of a lot of stuff going on, and I'll get to that in a minute. You got artsy people, you got people who are a little bit more open-minded. So Sydney was kind of a good space to go to if maybe you weren't straight, or you weren't just heterosexual, But anyway, Cindy Pastel, they're drag queen and they were performing and everything, and they got together with the doorwoman at one of the clubs that they were performing at, and actually kind of were staying with them and rooming with them at the time. This is back in the 80s, I think, or something like that. And Cindy Pastel was very much not about having a kind of quote unquote real feminine look, very much more like club kid kind of stuff, and very outlandish and artistic as well. They're also in the documentaries as well. But they ended up with a wife and a kid. That's not something you see every day. I know that there are drag queens out there who actually do have children. I know of at least 2 of them in Baltimore that have them. But this is just not something that you saw every day, especially back then in Australia, in Sydney. And so that was something that was kind of interesting to Stephan Elliott. And then also I think another inspiration was that Sydney had this big, it still has this big Mardi Gras gay pride parade thing going on. It's gay Mardi Gras. And that, of course, it's a crazy time and it's very well known. But apparently Stephan Elliott was just at Sydney Mardi Gras one year and he just saw a wig from a drag queen just rolling down the road after all the festivities happened. And he just kind of got inspired because he was it's a Western or something. What the heck? He kind of created the story. What would happen if these drag queens just would go across, Australia and go freaking do a show or something? And this is where he kind of made it. And then having Cindy Pastel there, as an inspiration as well, he then rewrote some of the piece as well to kind of add that in. There is reference of Les Girls in not Tu Hung Fu, in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Les Girls was an actual drag theater or restaurant pretty much in Sydney that was very much I've heard in America there's they had Lips back then. They also had Lucky Chang's in New York. That was a kind of drag bar / restaurant thing. But this was back in Sydney back then, and it was very much these very feminine looking drag queens. Some of them may also have been trans women as well who got gender confirming surgeries and things of that nature, but they were very well known. It was a well known kind of thing you did, and it wasn't even just gay centered. It was everyone went to Les Girls, people liked it. It was enjoyable because maybe you wouldn't have known. In the 80s, you have this Sydney gay scene is just really booming. It seemed again, not all of Sydney was safe, obviously, because no big city is completely safe. Sydney was definitely the place where if you were gay or any kind of queer, you were probably trying to get there because you at least had kind of like-minded people who weren't going to try and beat you up. We'll talk about it in the plot summary, but there's a bar scene in this film when the queens, they stop off at their first kind of rest stop location and they go into a bar, and It's a very famous scene, but it was inspired by an actual experience that Stephan Elliott had with his first boyfriend, where like literally they went to a bar to get a drink or something. Apparently, the people in the bar could kind of tell that they were, you know, maybe not straight. You know, this woman with like a bunch of guys around her kind of came up and said like, "We don't have anything for your kind here," which that's in part of the movie. So that was actually inspired by a real experience. I mentioned Sydney's gay Mardi Gras, so I mean, it's very famous. I learned about it from watching Kathy Griffin's My Life on the D-List, because she went there, which was kind of fun, and she met up with, like, Olivia Newton-John, rest in peace, and, like, Cyndi Lauper and Margaret Cho and all that. Because, of course, she would. But anyway, Sydney Mardi Gras actually started in 1978, and it started out as a fight between the queer people and police at the time, because police did not have a good reputation, these folks, at all. And it really started like a brawl between them, honestly. I think it was like 50-something people who like got arrested or something like that. It was crazy. I definitely recommend this documentary. It's a nice little snippet of just some of this information that you can learn. Let's see, there's that. And then there are also the 3 leads, like I mentioned. So these 3 leads, they actually went out and drag before filming. So they literally went down to Oxford Street and like the gay part of Sydney, like deep in there. And they went out and drag before they actually went to the film to kind of get into their characters, kind of see how they like to, you know, take their character and how they want to kind of feel in them. So that was kind of fun. And then honestly, in the late 80s and early 90s, the gay scene in Sydney just got wild and just unabashedly queer. You know, it was just kind of there. And I don't live in Australia or anything, but, you know, if I have anybody in Australia listening, you know, please let me know. I think Sydney is still known for being like a gay mecca. You know, it's a place where you want to go, where if you maybe live out, if you live out where Muriel lives, okay, and you don't want to be there anymore, you go to Sydney, just like she did, you know? But I think very much known, like, you know, we see Australia as like this place, you know, this country continent, you know, but you know, they've had strife too, and they've had to deal with, you know, similar things to how even America has had to deal with gay rights and gay liberation and all of that, you know, and it's just really interesting to kind of see all of that, because I would never have known any of it. So when it comes to this film being a cult classic, you know, I mean, yeah, it like has a high score on, you know, Rotten Tomatoes, and it made its money back and all that. But I definitely think that this movie in particular is a cult classic because, you know, it still holds on after, you know, almost 30 years at this point, I think. My God. Since it's been released, you know, it's still so important to people, and it's also spawned, you know, beautiful, you know, drag recreations of some of these looks that are in this film. It didn't win an Oscar for no reason, you know. It's also gone on to have a musical be done from it. I remember seeing that in the early 2010s when that musical first came to Broadway. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I'd never seen the film at that point. So I was like, maybe I'll get around to watching that one day. But I still think that this film has such a, you know, certain place in people's hearts. It's really kind of, it's definitely within the queer community seen as a film that obviously, like, sort of like Tu Wong Fu, thanks to everything Julie Newmar, you know, it's very much that kind of just like really great movie of just like, you know, these performers just, you know, enjoying themselves, going across the outback. Things get real here and there, but overall, I think this is really it's a great movie about friendship and getting to know other people. I think even Stephan Elliott, the director and writer, he said that this is a film that's really about a gay man and his son, you know, and you'll get that all later in the plot summary, but you know, I definitely think that this film is worth a watch, at least once, just to kind of see what you're missing out on. So now that we've talked about that, let's move into a plot summary. So we start off the film by seeing that there is a performance going on to a song called I've Never Been to Me by Charlene, I believe their name is. And this is our title sequence showing us who's in the film and everything. You see Mitzi Delbras, played by Hugo Weaving, is performing the song. And then you see Felicia Jollygoodfellow, played by Guy Pearce. They are singing this song together. They're lip syncing. And then that lip sync comes to an end. And then Mitzi is kind of looking at the audience, talking a little bit, and then she's walking off stage, and a beer can gets thrown at her, which is really rude, and is kind of heckled a little bit. And then Felicia kind of just reads the heckler, just kind of is like, "I'll piss off, whatever." They're in the back, so you see that Mitzi Tick is back in the dressing room, kind of getting their stuff together, and they get like a mystery phone call, pretty much. So they get some phone call, and then there's like this weird hospital dream where it's like you see these feet of these doctors and hospital staff like walking, and then you see them burst through these like double doors at the hospital, and then you see Mitzi there with like this chandelier dress, and she's holding a cigar in one hand and a lighter in the other, and like it's saying something like "it's a boy" or whatever, and it's just a weird kind of like dream sort of thing. Then you see Mitzi walking out in the rain, and she calls up her friend Bernadette, who's played by Terence Stamp, and Bernadette has some bad news. So we see that, Bernadette had been all in dark, and she's talking about how she had some bad news, right? And so you then see this fabulous funeral scene where it's these people all at a cemetery, and they're like in fabulous outfits, and you find out that Bernadette's man, this young gay dude, I guess, or I don't know what his sexuality is, he apparently died, which is really sad. But then you have that kind of Australian weird comedy where he died by peroxide inhalation. He tried to dye his hair himself, and then he choked on the fumes. So this is when we know that Mitzi has been asked to perform out of town. That's what the mystery phone call was from before. And she asked Bernadette to go with her. And she's like, all right, cool. And so she accepts the offer of like, all right, let's go. And she's like, oh, it'll be good. I need the time away. And it'll be good to, have us just the two of us. And then Felicia is then entered into the picture because, Mitzi says, like, actually the three of us. Mitzi's talking about how, like, she's really, showed herself to be, a good little performer. And so I thought she'd be good to bring along. So from what I kind of gather is that Bernadette and Mitzi have known each other. Maybe like Bernadette was like a mentor to Mitzi. And then you see that like Mitzi and Felicia know each other because obviously they were performing in the beginning, and they have kind of a relationship going on. But then you kind of see that like I don't think Bernadette and Felicia really know each other. So like he's just this young kind of annoying guy, Felicia is, and then Bernadette is this like older trans woman. She's just like, oh, okay, all right, I don't know what I've got myself into, but all right. They then all meet, and so Felicia is singing this little song, "I'm getting out of here, desert holiday, hip 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 hooray." So good. And then you see Felicia shares her little mountain climbing dream where she's like, all I've wanted to do was like go to this particular mountain as a queen and, just get to the top of it. And so that's when you hear Bernadette saying, "Just what we need. A cock in a frock on a rock." Then you see Felicia bought a bus, apparently, from some Swedish people. Lars, and Lars. And so, they're like, well, we own it now, so cool, great. Like, when do we need to return to school? So I think what Bernadette says. You see that Felicia is like, I christened this budget Barbie camper Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And so then you also kind of figure that, like, because there's a scene before she takes the champagne and just, like, busts it on the bus. But, like, you see a little something there where, Felicia, like, maybe went to her family and was like, oh, maybe if I get this thing, it'll, like, help me get through this phase or whatever. So, like, undercover, like, Felicia's family is, like, kind of undercover rich, maybe. She kind of comes from, like, more money, I guess. And they're getting ready to leave on their trip. They're packing up because this is when we find that like apparently they have to go to Alice Springs, which is like in the dead center of Australia apparently, and so they are getting ready for leave for the trip. They're getting on the bus and everything, and then they are sent off by like the people around them, be like, bye, have a good trip. So then they're on the road. And so then they got to break into the first aid bar that they got, which is just wonderful and fabulous. You see that they have a camping out. You'll also notice in this movie there's a lot of scenes of them just camping out outside the bus, which I think is fun. But this is the first night that they're camping out, and they're having some food or whatever. And Felicia is locked out of the bus and has to sleep outside. And this is when I think she's like trying to annoy Bernadette and Mitzi, being like, with my baby, and she's like trying to like go and like knock on the windows and stuff. It's just so funny. So then you have the scene where they're driving, they're singing some songs, and then they look out to just they stop the bus, and then they look out at just the expansive Australian outback that just awaits them, and they're just like, oh god, maybe we should have flown, like Jesus Lord. You have that scene. It's kind of a known scene where they just look out at the horizon. You see them talking to each other, talking, and then you get revealed that Mitzi actually has a wife, which they didn't exactly know about, Bernadette and Felicia, and that's who actually got him the gig. So when we got to that mystery phone call in the beginning, that's actually Mitzi's wife who is like calling him, telling him like, hey, I got you a gig, like you want to come out and do it. So this is when they finally kind of say, like, yeah, I have a wife. And they then have another campfire outside of the bus. And so Mitzi defends herself and says that she hasn't lied about anything. I mean, she wasn't exactly upfront with that information, but she maybe just didn't feel comfortable to say that. And it's not really like it affects anything too much. But she does say this line. She says, I'm not sorry that you're here. She still likes them both in some way, shape, or form, of course. And plus also, like, she wouldn't be bringing them to this gig if she didn't think that, like, you guys are talented, and I'm down with, like, having you come to this gig with me. And then there's a little card game with Mitzi and Felicia in the bus while Bernadette is driving. Then you have the entering of the first town, which is these iconic outfits that they're wearing. You got the flip-flop dress, which apparently was made for $7, and that like kind of like it was part of like obviously getting the Oscar for this film. But they got this in their entrance, which is the song is Disco Round, and they're just like walking through the town and just being like, oh hi, hello, and so they stop for a night at Mario's palace. So like they're going here, and it has this like kind of wilderness theme kind of thing going on, but they go up in their room and they're like, okay, here's how you do the minibar. Like you drink the gin and you put the water in it, and then like, oh, what do you do with the bourbon, or what do you do with the whiskey? And be like, that's where the complimentary tea bags come in, my dear. They're toasting and they're just like, all right, let's do it. Boom. So then you have they're going out to the Palace Hotel bar, and they're deciding to order some drinks. And this is that scene I was talking about from earlier, where this was based off of an actual experience that Stephan Elliott had in a bar with his first boyfriend. And this is where you have this kind of woman, kind of butchish woman, and she says, what do we have here, eh? A couple of showgirls. And so, just generally, there's going on some homophobia and some transphobia. We ain't got nothing for your kind here. All that kind of stuff. Because Bernadette is honestly the MVP of this film, and I love her so much. She has a great retort to this particular woman who's wanting to be all, like homophobic, transphobic, all that. I just wanted to read that to you now. So this woman's name is Shirley. And so Bernadette literally says to her, she says, now listen here, you mullet. Why don't you just light your tampon and blow your box apart? Because it's the only bang you're ever going to get, sweetheart. So, of course, that was, like, iconic and wonderful. And so, then you have, so she tells her off, and then you see them, then just being like, I would like a drink now. Thank you. And so, and then, because everyone's laughing at Shirley because she was just, like, being a homophobe and transphobe. So then you see Felicia is, like, just drunkenly singing off of her ass, which is hilarious. Mitzi, you kind of get this earlier, but she sells this Woman cream, which is just like makeup remover or like moisturizer or something, but she just is like trying to sell this in the bar, which I thought was really funny. And then Bernadette is binge drinking with Shirley, and she's just like doing that, and it's kind of like very much like Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that. It's kind of a scene sort of like that where there's this binge drinking scene, but Bernadette keeps her own, man. But then, because there was an earlier part of the scene where they're in the bus where, Felicia says something about, like, can you confirm a rumor for me? Is it true that her real name is Ralph? And so that is one of the kind of not great parts of the film is that, Felicia does do some examples of dead naming, with Bernadette. There's parts where he might call her Bernie every now and then, and I don't think she really likes that either. But yeah, when Felicia calls Bernadette Ralph, that's not very good at all. Don't do that. And so this happens in this scene, and then pretty much Bernadette is just pissed. So it happens at the bar, and then they're going back to their room at Mario's palace, and then like Bernadette is literally just like, because then you have Hugo leaving drunk off his ass, I guess, and he's in the bed, and so then Bernadette's like, what did you call me back at the bar? And Felicia's just kind of being like the annoying young queen person and all that, and literally Bernadette just chooses violence, which I appreciate, because she just like fights her in that room, because she's just like, you're not going to do that to me, you're going to respect me because I'm your elder, I already don't like you that much, but like you're not about to use a name that is pretty much like not my name, okay? We're not doing that today. So then you have, they wake up early next morning, and you see that there has been vandalism to their bus. So their silver bus that they got, it now has the graffiti of AIDS fuckers go home on the side of it, which is interesting because then you had like this scene where like you had this scene of like kind of like homophobia and transphobia with Shirley, right? And then they seem to be accepted once they kind of show that they're not going to be, fucked around with. And then and they seem to be like kind of accepted and all that, and people are like, all right, yeah, cool, whatever. But then, the next morning you have this horrible graffiti on your bus. So it's unfortunate. And Mitzi talks about how, she thought she's been through enough, but like it still hurts though, even with something like that. Like as a guy who, is a cis dude, probably some sort of gay in a way or whatever, I don't even know, but like, it just still hurts when you see that kind of stuff, and it's just not great. So then the girls are driving on the, on the road, and they come across a shortcut that they could take, and so Felicia's like on top of this bus, and she's just like lip syncing opera on like a big shoe, and there's like this it's not gold, it's silver lame, and it's just like in the wind, and it's so pretty. And that was like a shot that Stephan Elliott almost gave up on, apparently. Like he was gonna be like, oh, this isn't gonna work, and then it just so happens like right before he was about to just like say screw it, a big gust of wind just like came up and just like really helped to make that scene, because that's a very iconic scene, of course, with the silver. And then you find out a little bit about Adam's childhood, because Mitzi's saying like, what kind of childhood did you have, Adam Whiteley? And so you have flashback to a young Adam, and he has his creepy uncle who's like in a bathtub, and you're about to be like, okay, what's going on here? And the uncle is like giving you like weird vibes where he's like kind of a pedophile, and you're just like, ew, like what the hell? What is this? Do you want to play a game? But it's a game that we, have to you can't tell anybody about it. Just stick your hand in the water and just, whatever. Right? So you just think like, oh, Jesus Christ, what is this? Like, what is this about to be? But then what it ends up being is that, little Adam, he sticks his hand in the water, but he just takes the drain clog out, and it like pretty much takes the creepy uncle, it just takes his balls and like sucks them into the drain. And then you go back to Felicia and Mitzi, and they're just like laughing hysterically, because then he's all like, and the best part was that, parents were out to golf, so the fucker was just, the dirty fucker was just like left there for 7 hours. And it's just, I thought that was a really interesting scene, because you think to yourself when you're watching it, you're like, oh dear God, like what the hell is this? Like, because the whole kind of one of the arguments that some people who are against gay people have, or who aren't accepting of the lifestyle that comes along with it, is to say like, oh well, something must have happened to them in their childhood for them to turn out this way. That's not the truth. or anything. I mean, child sex abuse is just horrible in general. So, but the thing is like, when you have something like this where you're like, oh God, like, what is this about to be? But then there's the kind of comedic part of like, oh no, this pedo is literally just like, he got his balls stuck in the drain because the kid was like smart enough to just do that. You know what I mean? So I thought that was really interesting. Don't know if it completely holds up still, but I still think it's kind of one of those scenes where I'm just like, oh, okay, got it. So then they're driving around at night, and then guess what happens? They become stranded. Oh no, the bus is broken down. And so then they're just stranded on the bus. So then, you then have the scene where they have breakfast next morning. So you have, I believe it's Felicia who's about to like start painting this bus pretty much. 'Cause she's just like, well, I'm going to cover this graffiti. Why not? I love the breakfast of choice because I don't see Felicia eating, but like Mitzi has her Fruit Loops. And then I love how, Bernadette just has her hormones in a bowl. So she's just like taking her hormone pills. It's just iconic. Yeah, Felicia starts painting the bus. She starts painting it pink, which is great. And then Bernadette just starts walking into the Outback. She's like, you know what? I'm just going to go get help, all right? Because she's just like, I'm not standing around with this shit. And she is a woman, okay? So, like, she is taking her purse. She don't take no sunscreen, no water, no nothing. But she's just about to be like, I'm going to get this shit done, okay? I'm going to figure this out. And I'm like, good for you, Bernadette. That's why she's such an icon in this movie. But, then you see Mitzi just starting to rehearse because she's like, well, fuck it. I might as well, rehearse our number, which is to I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. So you see Mitzi in this, like, little green outfit. And she's like, she's like performing just like in the heat of Australian outback. So you have that. Then you see a super soaker. You see that Felicia has a super soaker of paint for the bus, so that's not just her like doing it by hand. She's like, ha ha, like super soaker, let's do this. And then you cut back to like Bernadette just like walking through the actual outback, which is hilarious. But then Bernadette finally finds help with these people who are like in like a friggin' dune buggy or some shit. Maybe not dune buggy, but like similar. Mr. and Mrs. Spencer, and they're there with a dead kangaroo, I think, or something like that. And so she has to, Bernadette is like, oh, cool, like, we need your help, like, our car broke down, our bus broke down, like, we need your help. And so, she's very nicely, like, they take her back to the bus, which is great, and she has to sit next to this dead kangaroo or whatever, which is gross, but she's just like, all right, cool, great. So Bernadette comes back with help, but then when Mr. and Mrs. Spencer meet Mitzi and Felicia, they just like drive off, which is so horrible. And then you get the wonderful line of like Felicia just saying, how many times do I have to tell you, Mitzi, green is not your color? So then you have another campfire going on as well. Again, lots of campfires in this movie because you have both the day shots and then also the night shots as well. Bernadette, she is talking a little bit about being a trans woman, like just what it's kind of like. And I think that's when you see, I believe, the flashback little Bernadette. And, you just see that, like, this is kind of how it's been for me. And I decided to transition and do the surgery. I believe she does talk about, I think she mentioned it in passing, just that she had gotten the surgery, gender confirming surgery. And then you hear Fernando by ABBA, and then I just felt like I was back in Muriel's wedding, which was really fun. So I had Fernando Yas in my my notes. And then you have the girls that are rehearsing outside the bus, and then they meet a very nice Aboriginal man. His name's Alan. Oh, nice night for it. Cool, can you help us? So, like, the girls are then brought to a nice gathering of Aboriginal Australian people just in the outback. They seem like really nice. They're just hanging out. And they're just like sitting around because they're doing their little, they got some music going and, a little bit of dancing, I think. They're just enjoying themselves. And then, the girls decide to do a performance for them. And so they have these fabulous outfits that they're just dancing in. And the Aboriginals are, like, so into it. Like, they're down for it. It's I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. So, yeah, they were just like, yeah, they seem all into it. They then throw a little bit of a didgeridoo musical interlude in there, too, to, like, go along with the music. And I love that. And then also, there was a silver outfit for Alan that he's wearing, and he's a part of the performance as well. And it's just like so super nice. So I was just like, oh, that's great. This apparently was also kind of a point of contention for this script actually even getting made. because like, you know, a lot of studios that read it were like, oh my god, this is too racist, this is too, you know, like homophobic, kind of like it's too this, too that. Like, you're about to put an Aboriginal man into like drag, like what the hell are we supposed to do with that, you know? Because from my baseline understanding, I believe that when it comes to Aboriginal Australian folks and, you know, people who are not Aboriginal in Australia, there's a bit of a contentious history there. There's some stuff going on, you know, there's not great history there. So, you know, that's always something that's kind of permeating their culture. But even in this, I mean, the Aboriginals are like the coolest people. Like, they're so nice to these, you know, performers. You know, I love that. It's great. So then you see, like, you know, they're just in the bus. It's Bernadette and Felicia are just, like, in the bus, and they're just like, all right, what are we going to do? I think Bernadette's, like, going through an outfit of Felicia's, and she finds this, like, little glass. It's like a glass bottle, sort of, and she's just like, what the hell is this? And then Felicia talks about how she went to an ABBA show a couple years ago, and she, pretty much followed one of the ABBA members into the bathroom, or like waited until she was done, and she apparently took a piece of the singer from ABBA's like turd, and she puts it in a little jar that she like wears around her neck, maybe, or something like that, every so often, because she loves ABBA so much. So I'm just like, okay, cool. Then you see Felicia and Bernadette. They're flying this blow-up doll kite to, I guess, signal for help, because I believe Alan helps Mitzi get to somebody who can help them. And so that's when we have the introduction to Bob the mechanic, played by Bill Hunter. So Bob checks out the bus. He's like, you're going to need this, this, and this. And be like, but, you know, I'll take you back to my place. You know, we'll figure it out. Or no, it's the introduction where they meet them, and then they're like, yep, like, we're going to take this back to my house. And then you are introduced to his wife, Cynthia Campos, played by Julia Cortez. And, you know, she is this apparently mail-order bride. She is very Filipino. And also just kind of casually you know, caricature of race of Filipino people, it seems like. Just like a little overtly, you know, kind of performative. So not exactly, you know, the most PC thing, of course, but, you know, you have her introduction. Then you have dinner at Bob and Cynthia's. So they're talking about, like, what do they do? And, you know, this is what they do. And, you know, they perform and everything. They perform as drag queens pretty much. Bob seems like pretty into it. Like, he's just like, oh, well, you know, back when I was in Sydney, you know, I went and saw La Gills and I really liked it. So, you know, he was down for it. He was just like, all right, cool. Nothing wrong with me. Because then also Cynthia's like, well, I perform too. I'll perform for you now. And then Bob's just like, no, you're not. So then they go out to the pub. Because, you know, Bob's like, well, you know, if you want, like, I can probably set up at the pub. Like, you can do a little show there, which is great. And they're like, okay, cool, I guess. So then you see the girls getting ready in this little, like, backstage area of the bar. And they're just like, all right, well, I guess we're doing this. And then while that's happening, you see Cynthia's back at home because Bob has, like, come and said, like, you know, yeah, like, because I think Felicia asked, like, where's that wife of yours? And Bob's like, well, you know, she's not allowed to come to the pub because, like, you know, she'll problem with alcohol, like, she'll make a fool of herself, kind of a thing. So then you see, like, you cut back to Cynthia, and she's just, like, cursing this locked up cabinet that's, like, you know, up on a shelf or whatever. And she's just breaking into this cabinet that is filled with ping pong balls. So you're just like, okay, what the hell is this? And so you're just like, all right, then. So then you have the performance of Shake or Groove thing where the girls, you know, the queens, they are, you know, performing and, you know, they're performing and they end their performance and then Bill Hunter's just like, yeah, let's do it. Nobody else seems to be clapping, which is, you know, just like, okay, well, great. And then Cynthia comes in, okay, and she is ready, girl. She is just ooh, girl, she is so into this. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, but you see that people are just like, oh yeah, Cynthia's here. Great. So this is obviously a time where maybe she's done this before. And so you see that, she takes herself up on the stage, on the bar, really, because that's where the queens were performing. So she gets up on the bar and, she has apparently, Julia Cortez just had this like outfit apparently. And so she's like, being all sexy and everything, and you see her like with this little zipper on her like underwear, and she like pulls down the zipper, and you're just like, what the hell is she about to do? She pretty much takes a ping pong ball and puts it somewhere, and then it kind of just like pops out into the crowd, and this is what's called a ping pong show, everybody. I think it's something where you can see this in some Asian countries. There are these kind of like live sex themed shows where things like this happen. I don't know the details and history of it, but look it up for yourself if you want to, and look up the history of it if you want. But that's what this is. And then of course, like, Bob is just like embarrassed, and he's just like, come on, like get down, like let's stop doing this. But I will also say with this particular part of the film, like, it's a very known part of the film because it's just so outlandish and crazy. But, like, at least the thing is that, like, Cynthia seems to really be into it. Like, she has a certain level of agency when it comes to doing this. It's not like she's being forced into it, Like, she gets a certain level of satisfaction from doing this kind of thing. So, I mean, good for her, I guess. But, like, again, it's one of those things where you're just like... Bob's just like, oh, Jesus, Lord Christ. Like, then you see that Bob takes Cynthia back home, and then you see the next day where they just break up. And Cynthia just leaves in a car, and she's just like, I don't like you anymore. You have small ding-a-ling, so that's the whole thing, too. So I'm just like, all right, well, I guess he's alone now. So then you see that they're back on the road again, and Bob is now joining the trip because, like, he doesn't have a wife anymore, and I guess he could just, like, maybe he already owns this house that he has or whatever, but, like, he doesn't really need to be, he needs to get away, obviously. And so, he joins the trip to kind of make sure that they can get through everywhere, because they still have to also get, like, a certain part, they have to be able to get it, so this is what they're going to get. So, he's just like kind of accompanying the trip. You see Felicia on top of the bus at this point. She's in a new outfit. It's like pink, and she's singing opera. She's lip syncing opera. And oh, I was mistaken from earlier. You don't see a flashback of Bernadette's childhood story. That actually comes up now, which you have this like time at Christmas where like little Bernadette and like I guess her brother or sister, I think it was her sister. They kind of switched the presents that they got. So like I think the idea is that little Bernadette like went and like switched her present that she got as when she was a young boy, with her sisters that she got, and they were kind of, he switched the presents. So that was kind of fun. And, just talking about like, well, yep, this is why I did this. And this is why I knew like, hey, I wasn't born to be a boy. I was born to be a woman and be a girl, So then you see Felicia and Mitzi. They're dancing near beside the campfire while Bob and Bernadette are like checking on the engine on the bus. And I like this scene because it's Felicia and Mitzi. They're dancing, and there's not like a ton of chemistry or sexual tension between Mitzi and Felicia or anything, but they're dancing and all that, and be like, again, Felicia's bringing up the fact that like, oh well, we get to meet the missus in just a little bit, and he talks about something of like, well, I mean, are you gay? And then Felicia's like, oh well, you're gay. Be like, I don't know, and then be like, all right, well, okay, then you're straight then, and then he's like, I don't know, and then it's like, well, what are you then? And Mitzi's just like, well, I don't fucking know, like, he doesn't want to be labeled, I guess, it's a thing. I think Bernadette says something. She says, we've only recently discovered that young Anthony here bats for both teams, and then Mitzi says, I do not, and then Felicia's all like, oh, so we're straight? And then Mitzi's like, no. And then Felicia's like, oh, we're not. So we're a donut puncher after all. Like, we're gay then, right? And he's like, no. And then we're like, what the hell are we? And then Mitzi's just like, I don't fucking know. Like, and I kind of like that scene because it's just like, well, he doesn't fucking know. Like, all he knows is that, like, he has a wife and and all that, but I mean, he's not trying to label it. He's not trying to label what he is, and more power to him, you know? I mean, whatever. It's nobody else's business except his own. The gang get up next morning, and they take a bath, quote unquote, in nearby water, which is just like water that's just like out in the outback, because obviously they haven't come to a town yet. And you can see Bob and Bernadette being a little flirty with one another, and, you know, it's real nice. Because you can tell that they have chemistry as well. Bernadette and Bob do have some sort of chemistry. And he's really taken a liking to her, which is really great. And so then you see they're back in the bus, they're driving, and you have a lip sync with my baby from Felicia, who was singing it earlier when she was like locked out of the bus, but she's doing it throughout the whole bus now, which I thought was really fun. And then the gang, as I refer to them, stop in a new town. I think, like, what's his name? Bob says something about, he's like, well, I'm going to go to the Gentleman's Social Club. Like, I'm going to go there while I'm here because I have a few, you know, mates out here. And then Felicia's like, I want to go with Bob to the Gentleman's Club. And then, you know, Bernadette's just like, Adam, you're not doing that. Like, you're either going to come to dinner with us or you're going to stay in the room and watch TV, okay? Like, you're not doing anything like crazy because, like, friggin', you know, it's not exactly safe to be like prancing, prattling around, you know what I mean? So then you see Bernadette and Mitzi, they have dinner together, they're talking a little bit, and then, you know, Mitzi's asking, like, do you ever regret, like, not having kids or anything, or any of this stuff? Bernadette doesn't say that she regrets it or anything, but, you know, it's just one of those things you don't really think about after a while, and you know, she even says, Bernadette does say, like, you know, I think you seem like a great husband to your wife, and if given the chance, you'd also be a great father, you know, and it's like, oh, that's so nice, you know. So then Felicia and their, you know, trifling self, they decide to take some drugs, some E that they had, you know, stashed away, I guess. And they go to the video store where she asks, you know, do you have the Texas Chainsaw mascara? Which I love. Then she goes out to, okay, so then you have Bob had gone out to this, like, friend, you know, circle that he had, and he comes, Felicia then comes across in full drag, she comes across these men in town, and she's just like, you know, okay, I guess I'll take a beer and, you know, just, like, mingle a little bit, and, you know, then one of the guys, like, kind of notices that, like, Guy Pearce is jacked as anything. So, like, he's, like, jacked as anything. But, like, he notices that his arm's, like, really big and muscly. So, they're like, oh, no, this is not a cis woman. This is a, you know, drag queen. And then they, you know, Felicia gets chased by these homophobes, pretty much. Mitzi and Bernadette, they're still having their dinner and all that. You kind of cut back to between them, and then they see Felicia getting chased by people, which is just like, oh my god, what the hell, you know? And so then they're then going after her because it's like, okay, like, we gotta, like, save this fucking man from getting killed, pretty much. And this is, like, a pretty intense scene of gay bashing, honestly. I mean, I'm just like, Jesus Lord, like, it's, like, pretty, yeah, it's pretty intense. Like, they are spreading his legs, and, like, I don't know what the hell they're gonna do to him, but, like, you know, and then Bob's trying to be there to be like, you know, stop, like, you know, don't do this. Like, it's horrible. And then the one, the only, Bernadette comes up, because you have Mitzi there and you have Bernadette there. Okay, so here's what Bernadette says to these homophobes that are about to, like, literally, you know, gay bash Felicia. She says, stop flexing your muscles, you big pile of budgie turd. I'm sure your mates will be much more impressed if you can just go back to the pub and fuck a couple of pigs on the bar. And then Bob's like, Bernadette, please. And then Frank, who is, like, one of the homophobes, he's like, Bernadette, well, I'll be darned. The whole circus is in town. Well, I suppose you want to fuck too, do you? Come on, Bernadette. Come and fuck me. That's it. Come on. Come and fuck me. Come on. Fuck me. And so Bernadette literally just knees this guy in the groin like a queen. And she just says, there. Now you're fucked. Which is honestly just an iconic scene, and I fucking love it. It's so good. And then, like, you know, they're taking good old, you know, Felicia back to the hotel, and Mitzi's pissed at her. She's just like, oh, great, you did drugs. That's awesome. Like, fucking hooray for you. Like, you're an idiot. Then you see there is a scene where, Mitzi's pissed at her. But, like, then you have a scene with, Bernadette and Felicia, who, she's crying, but Bernadette does give some sage wisdom to her, where it's kind of like, listen, like, it's not easy being this, it's not easy doing any of this. And so, like, let this be a lesson to you that, like, it'll make you stronger. Use this as a way to make it, better. I will now read to you the Bernadette and Felicia monologue that they have. So, Bernadette says to Felicia, "It's funny. We all sit around mindlessly slagging off that vile stinkhole of a city," referring to Sydney, "but in its own strange way, it takes care of us. I don't know if that ugly wall of suburbia has been put there to stop them getting in or us getting out. Come on, don't let it drag you down. Let it toughen you up. I can only fight because I've learned to. Being a man one day and a woman the next isn't an easy thing to do." So it's like, it's such a good little, like, moment between Bernadette and Felicia, because at this point, like, Felicia's been kind of an asshole to Bernadette, right? If you watch this movie, you know that it's like, oh yeah, no, she totally has been. This is a moment where it's like, listen, I've been there, I've had to deal with this horrible bullshit, and you know what? It never gets easier. I've just learned how to deal with it by fighting back. Let this be a lesson. Which I love. It's just that's such a good little scene. And so then you see Felicia in the tanning bed next day, where they're, on the road again, getting away from this little city. And they're off to Alice Springs. So Felicia's in the tanning bed, which is like kind of under the bus, which is kind of fun. And Mitzi apologizes from yelling at her, which, yeah, I can understand that you would do that. It's your friend. And your friends might do stupid things every now and then. But, like, you don't want to stay mad at them. So then you find out Bill and Cynthia's marriage story, where, like, I guess he's sharing this information with the queens. And pretty much, like, he had, like, gotten together with Cynthia, but, like, it was sort of like a real rushed thing. And unfortunately for her, she kind of didn't do her research or anything. And she thought she thought that Bill was, that Bob was from Sydney, and she didn't realize that she'd just be out in the middle of freaking nowhere in the outback. He shares that story. You then have around the campfire again. And then, Mitzi and Felicia are like, all right, time for bed. But then Bob and Bernadette, they stay up for a little bit. And so, they're about to go in and just, like, have their time to go to sleep. And then Bob and Bernadette are just staying out to get to know each other a little bit more. And then, so you see Mitzi and Felicia are inside the bus, and they're just, like, two little kids, like, just looking, like, just kind of spying on Bernadette and Bob, which is so hilarious. They have, like, these little binoculars. It's so cute. I wrote in my notes that they are honestly, like, friendship couple goals, kind of. Or no, that's not what it was. It's friend goals. Still kind of couple goals too. Like, you want somebody who you can kind of be, and especially since, with Mitzi, she just, like, yelled at, the night before or whatever, like, she just yelled at Felicia for being kind of dumb and, like, putting herself into a dangerous situation. But, like, hopefully with a friend, like, you can be like, hey, like, don't ever do that again, because you could have gotten yourself killed. But, like, I still love you. I still am your friend, so I love their little, just, like, looking at them being like, oh, hee. It's nice, because you're like, okay, Bob and Bernadette definitely are, like, getting to know each other, and they're having chemistry, which is great. Then the next morning, Mitzi and Felicia, they find Bob and Bernadette just outside. Bernadette's face, like, is in a cake, apparently. I don't know how they made this cake, but, like, her face is in the cake, and then Felicia says something about, like, someone left Bernadette's cake out in the rain, which I thought was really funny. So then the girls and Bob, they arrive at Alice Springs Casino finally. So this is, I guess, the casino where, I think you did learn this at one point, but, like, that's pretty much where Marion, who is the wife to Mitzi, they own it pretty much, and they, like, run it. And so Mitzi and his wife meet up, and they're the ones who are couple goals, because they're just, like, so wonderfully, like, friendly with one another, and they just love each other so much. And it's just, they're so great. And then you see that Mitzi has like an actual literal child. So like it has like a 7 or 8 year old or some 8 or 9 maybe. Um, but like, Marion like take, Mitzi to go meet his son, which he hasn't seen in a while. He hasn't seen him in a while. His name is Adam. Yeah, and then the hospital scene from earlier in the movie now makes more sense because they play it again, but now it's like I think like Bernadette and what is it? Bernadette and Felicia, they play some of the people, and then Bill Hunter, Bob, he's like the doctor or whatever. And now it makes a lot more sense because you're just like, oh no, he had a literal child. Got it. Okay. So then the girls like kind of barge in, and that's when you see this whole hospital scene. They kind of go in and they find out about said child. So they find out about Adam because they didn't know. And like Bernadette's just like, you shouldn't shock me like that. Now I have like this bruise on my head. And so then they're getting ready for the show. And I'm just like, it's just so nice and wonderful. And you see that Felicia has underwear on their head. So like, I'm just like, okay, like that's a way that you're using it as like a wig cap almost. It's very interesting, or like your makeup cap, if you will. So I thought that was kind of fun. Then you see Bob comes in and gives flowers to Bernadette because he loves her. And he just wants to give that to her to, be nice. And then you finally then get the most iconic drag performance ever, where these drag queens, they lip sync to Finally by CeCe Peniston, which I love that song. Finally, you've come along the way I feel. Oh, it's so good. And so then you see like they're transitioning into like their emu headdresses, which are everything and iconic. And then so it's just a kind of an extended drag performance scene. And it's really good. And then at the end of the show, they're in these like Marie Antoinette kind of like friggin' like get-ups or whatever, which is great. But then you have, the show ends and they get like applause and stuff like that. And then Mitzi faints at the end of the performance because she saw that her kid, who Marion has said to him like, oh, he's in bed, like don't worry about him, all that. Well, he sees his kid at the show and he just has these conflicted feelings, so like he faints at the show. Mitzi, Tick, whatever his name is, like, they're having some conflicting feelings about this because am I even going to be a good dad? Like, I don't know if I'm going to be a good dad because the plan is, I guess, to bring Adam back to Sydney. But Mitzi and Marion are talking about Ben, their son, and talking about like, listen, Tick, listen, Mitzi, I'd like to take some time away. Like, I have been doing this forever. I think Adam's 8 years old because she says, I haven't had a holiday in like 8 years and you're my husband. Like, I need a break. And fair enough. I mean, there you go. Especially even though they aren't together like that, they're not divorced. I totally understand. And Marion, says she needs a holiday. She asks him to take care of him for a bit. So the assumption is that he brings the son back to Sydney and all. Marion's talking about Ben of like, hey, like, look, he's understanding, like, it's fine. Bernadette and Bob then have a nice little tender moment where I guess the flowers that he brought her, like she had left them somewhere by accident, and he brings them back to her, and it's like really nice, and he brings them to her room. So then Felicia and Ben, the kid, are hanging out. This is where we find out that apparently Marion had a girlfriend, so maybe Marion also is like kind of queer a little bit too, because the kid says very, mom had a girlfriend, but she got over her. Because Felicia's kind of asking like, do you know what your dad does for a living? My mom says he's the best in the business or whatever. And then I love when Ben is like you want to play in my room? I got Lego. And then Felicia's like, okay, yeah, let's play with Legos. That's fun. So then you see the girls, Bob and Marion and Ben. They are going out to like a little trip out to the mountains. On the bus, they're playing charades. This is like they do a charade of like Rock Hudson, where one of them picks up a rock, which I thought was kind of funny. And then the kid, he's doing like this charade. He's like doing something where he's like cradling a baby, and then he's doing this thing where like he puts his hands as like horns, and he puts them on there, and then everyone gets it. Oh, it's Lindy Chamberlain, which Lindy Chamberlain was the whole "the dingo ate my baby" thing, which is kind of a known Australian kind of case that happened. Oh, another really like a scene that I like is that Mitzi and her son finally talk like next to the water, and this is like I think in the documentary Between a Rock and a Hard Place, I believe Hugo Weaving talked about, or Stephan Elliott or somebody was talking about how, you know, this scene is like Mitzi trying to be kind of like straight with his kid in a way, and I'm just like, huh, okay, yeah, I mean I can kind of see that, but it's just so nice because like he's just trying to figure out how to have a relationship with his kid pretty much, because you can see that like Ben is really accepting of his dad. He even asks him, he says, will you have a boyfriend when we go back to Sydney? And he's like, maybe. And his son just says, that's good. Like his son is just so accepting and so loving of his father, you know, which is something that I think Mitzi was really worried about. Like she was like, am I gonna even be a good dad? Like I don't know. And so then the queens finally go mountain hiking in drag, and they finally get to do that. And they're like, all right, we did it. Now what do we do? And they're just like, I want to go home. It's time to go home. Let's go. So then, you know, the girls are packing up to leave. So, you know, like Mitzi's taken Ben to Sydney for the time. And, you know, they're all packing up a little bit. And then Bernadette and Bob are actually staying at the casino. You know, Marion needs somebody to kind of help with the entertainment and, like, make sure all that stuff gets done. And there's no better person to do that than Bernadette. That's always really nice and great. So then you see that Mitzi and Bernadette, they have a little moment where, you know, they're just like, oh, girl, like, you know, I'm gonna miss you. But, you know, and she's even like, you know, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to do this? And, you know, Bernadette's like, you know what? I don't quite know, but I won't know unless I give it a try, you know? And that's fair. You know, you won't know until you do it. So, and then you see Mitzi, Ben, and Felicia, they're all leaving. There is kind of this unfortunate moment of like Felicia dead naming Bernadette before she leaves, which is not great, but you know, you have that little bit of scene. And then you just have like, because you've seen that Ben is into ABBA. So like, you know, will you perform ABBA when, you know, will you do ABBA for me? Kind of a thing. And he's like, yeah, sure. Why not? And so then you see this ABBA lip sync where, you know, it's Mitzi and Felicia. They're singing, you know, they're performing ABBA and they're lip syncing it, which is like really nice. And then you see that, you see that Ben, his son, is like, you know, working the spotlight or whatever at the club that they were at in the beginning. And yeah, and you just see it's all nice. And then the number ends and, you know, Mitzi says like, oh, it's good to be home. And he like takes his wig off and just like makes his face to the camera. And then that's the end of the movie. And you have these end credits, you know, talking about, I don't remember what the song was, but it's like a drag queen who's like lip syncing the song that plays over the credits. And so that's the end of The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Comes to this film, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, I mean, it is definitely, absolutely, for me, a cult classic type of film. I think it is, it obviously, you know, I think some sort of inspiration came from, you know, I think with Tu Wong Fu, there was some inspiration pulled from this film, just a little bit, although I think Tu Wong Fu doesn't get too serious when it comes to it. I do like this movie. I like both movies, fair enough, but I like this one just a little bit more. And it was also cool to see like these stories of queer people and, you know, a person, even though, you know, of course it wasn't played by a trans woman, but, you know, seeing the life of somebody who was transitioning to be a woman and who has done that and has had experience and, you know, their characters, you know, just one that is so seminal to the community. And just, this is of course like a real great drag movie, of course. It's, it made a musical adaptation of it, which is awesome. And, you know, the music's really good in it. So I definitely think if you haven't already done so, you should definitely take the chance to watch Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Currently right now it is on Tubi. I think it might be on Pluto TV 2 as well. If you want, you can also probably pick up the DVD of this or something too. Or if you want to like pull up and rent it, like, or whatever, that's fine too. I definitely think you should take a look at it. If you haven't already done so, I definitely think it is worth your time. As always, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so by emailing cultcinemacircle@gmail.com. If you want to give any movie recommendations, give feedback on the show, or if you just want to say, hey girl, hey, I'm open to all of it. You can also follow Cult Cinema Circle on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd. Instagram handle is Cult Cinema Circle. Twitter handle is Cult Cinecircle. On those platforms, I tend to post when new episodes release. I'll post what the next episode is going to be. I make Instagram stories with little fun facts and all that, and just general fun stuff over there. And on Letterboxd, you can find me at Jesse, Jesse, Kremp, Kremp, all one word. On there, I tend to log the movies that I've been watching. I write little reviews about them, and just general foolishness over there. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast on your podcatcher of choice. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, or wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcasts. I make it pretty easy for you to find the show. Be sure to leave 5 stars and a 1 to 2 sentence review. It helps get people to see the show more, and it helps more people find the show in general. As always, thank you so much for listening to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. And remember, I've been to paradise, but I've never been to me. Take care. Bye.